All right, so let's talk about the first message. This is the first impression a girl's gonna have of you, so obviously it matters. One quick thought before we get into the message itself is that a lot of sites do have the option to wink or show interest in girls in various ways, or like rate their appearance. And if you do that, that puts you on the girl's radar. It lets you know, she's messaged and notified that you liked her or showed interest or whatever, without you actually sending a message, and then she can respond back and wink back or message you back. And I used to do this. It's highly, highly time efficient. The reason I don't do it now is I find that a lot of fairly cute girls will message you back, but the hottest girls usually just never respond without a message, so I usually just go straight to the message. However, I've also noted that if you wink first and then send a message later, it doesn't look try hard. It doesn't make you like less likely to get a response to the message than if you hadn't winked first. So if you want to do wink first and then send a message as a strategy, that's workable. The reason I personally don't is it's just a little harder for me to keep track of who's who that way instead of just starting off with a message. So that's my own thing, but either one is a viable strategy. But let's get into the message itself. And before I tell you what to do in the message, let me tell you what not to do. And there are basically two things that guys do wrong in messaging this first message. The first is not doing enough, and the second is doing way too much. So let's first talk about not doing enough. Not doing enough would be doing something like sending, hey, what's up as a first message, or hi cutie, something like that, right? Or how was your day? Something that's boring, bland, doesn't convey your personality, and just doesn't get sifted out of the wall of noise that she's being sent. And so it's not like it's making you look bad or lame or weird or creepy in any way. It's just not doing enough to get her attention, right? And so she's just going to pass you by like every other guy. She probably at this point hasn't looked at your profile, might not even be looking at your pictures beyond like a very cursory glance, if even that. So if the message doesn't do enough, it just won't get her to the next step. It won't get your profile opened. It just doesn't do enough, okay? So you need to kind of do enough to set yourself apart. Do something a little more interesting than that. On the flip side, a lot of guys do the like multi-paragraph email. And the problem with this, first of all, is that if you're writing custom multi-paragraph emails to every girl, that takes a lot of time. But even if you were to copy and paste multi-paragraph emails or something like that, it just looks try-hard. It looks like you spent hours and hours, or like at least, minutes and minutes, a very long time, messaging some girl you don't know, and it makes the girl wonder, does this guy not have better things to do in his life? Why is he so wrapped up on me? He doesn't know me yet, right? Especially guys will mix these long messages with things like professions of love, telling her she's the one, telling her like he noticed something amazing in her profile and like something like really hit him emotionally. And it just looks needy. It looks like a guy that doesn't have a lot of options, because if you're that into some girl you've never spoken to, what does that say about your history of girls? Again, be conscious of what you're conveying, okay? So you don't want to do the nothing email that doesn't get her attention, but you also don't want to do the multi-paragraph thing that just looks super needy and try hard. You want to hit something in the middle. So usually you want to go anywhere from like about a sentence to a paragraph, and you want it to be hard-hitting, to the point, and then done. One other quick concept along those lines that I'm going to bring up is the concept of offering value. Okay, anytime that you are providing your own perspective, your own opinions, you're letting the girl get to know you, you're doing what I call offering value. You're making a unique conversation that's more fun for her. Anytime you do things like ask her questions she's heard before or rely on her to carry the conversation, you're doing what I call taking value. And a lot of guys in both of these bad scenarios, what they're essentially doing is taking value. Right? In the scenario of not doing enough, they're taking value by saying, I'll do this little bit, now I'll leave the burden on you. And most girls just aren't going to work that hard for a guy they don't know. In the you're so special, you're so amazing, yeah, you're offering a lot, but you're still sort of taking value because you're making it all about her. You're not conveying any of your own personality, all right? Again, the whole frame you want to have is, I'm a cool guy who has an abundant life that's amazing, and I'm inviting you into it. So inherently, you need to be conveying your life and your personality. So keep that idea in mind, this idea of offering value. That's going to come up a lot when we talk about the next section, which is ongoing texting. Next concept for the first message. This is a concept from internet marketing, and it's called split testing or A/B testing. What you're basically doing here is it doesn't really matter if you have the most brilliant text message, the first one you try and send to girls. What really matters is that you eventually figure out what the best one is. So what I suggest is come up with 2 or 3 messages you think might work and send them all to different girls. and then kind of like you don't even really have to measure it. You could keep like a spreadsheet and measure it, but really you'll get an idea in your head which messages are getting responses and which ones aren't. And what you should do is the ones that aren't getting responses, cut those out and replace them with other ones that you think might, and keep upgrading and implementing new ones and making your messages better and better. If you really wanted to, you could even split test without messaging the girls in your city. For example, say you live in LA, you might put on your profile that you live in New York, send out a ton of messages in New York, see what messages work, and then and only then use them in LA so that you're not burning out your local leads, right? That's not a big deal in New York or LA, but if you're in a smaller city, it could actually be a factor. So it makes sense to do some testing away from where you are and then bring it back to your own place. But it's very important to test. In fact, if you sucked at online dating but were willing to test properly, you'd eventually get good. If you were pretty good but not willing to test, you'd be stagnant at that level. So the testing process is actually more important than anything else I can teach you. Okay, so I want to reiterate again with the first message, the biggest thing is get her attention, get her to open your profile. You have to trust that your profile is good, which is why we spent the time on the profile and got it good. All right? But once you're there, the message just gets her attention. So now I'm going to tell you 3 different styles of message that I've found work. Okay? The first style of message is the one-liner. The one-liner is just the clever, witty line. It could even be like a cheesy pickup line. It could be a funny line from a movie, just something to get her attention. A couple of these off the top of my head, and not that these are like the best lines in the world, but they follow the format, would be something like, "You're kind of cute, dork," right? So it gets her attention, like, whoa, he called me a dork, but it's also a compliment. It makes her respond. It makes her sit up and take notice. Another one would be like the classic old school bad pickup line that if I said you had a beautiful body, would you hold it against me, right? Now that's cheesy. I don't recommend it because everybody's heard it. But if you had something of like a similar cleverness that everybody hasn't heard, i.e. something from a movie that you really like or something you came up with, that kind of a thing that just grabs her attention can work as a one-liner. Okay? The next format is the Mad Lib. And if you guys ever seen Mad Libs as a kid, it's these things where it's a story and they ask you for certain parts of speech. You fill in those parts of speech and then you create a story from it. So the Mad Lib basically is you have a certain parts that are going to be in place on every text, and then you can briefly, and I mean briefly, peruse their profile for a quick detail you can throw in. Now the nice thing about this is it proves that it's not a copy and paste, even though it's essentially a copy and paste. So it makes the girl more likely to feel like it was personalized to her. And also more likely to respond even almost out of like obligation and niceness. Now, you don't want to be in general and online relying on obligation and politeness to get responses, but all things being equal, if you have that on your side as well, why not? Okay, so the idea here would be something like one I use is you had me at X and then somehow didn't lose me with Y, right? So you had me with avid reader and somehow didn't lose me with your weird foodie thing or whatever. Doesn't even really matter what you fill in here, but the idea is you're picking 2 quick things that caught your attention about her and you're throwing them into this formula, which is again saying you're a discerning man, that sort of thing. So that's an example of a formula you could use, and there's a million other ones you could use. Another one I've done sometimes is you challenge them, be like, I'll buy you a drink if X, that sort of thing, and then you use like the X comes from their profile. So these are formats where you can Mad Lib in different responses for different girls. And then the last one is just the short paragraph, the sort of short, honest paragraph that conveys the right things. Okay, so if you're going to do the short paragraph, what you basically say is, I don't know you that well, but I'm intrigued by you. You're probably getting messages from a lot of weird, lame guys. Anyway, I'm different than that, and I'd like to talk to you. Something like that. It's genuine, it's heartfelt. But you also have to still be polarizing, right? When you say you're getting responses from guys that do XYZ thing, don't be like you're probably getting messages from a lot of lame guys. Instead, you could say you're probably getting messages from guys who live in their parents' basement and collect like Star Wars figurines, right? Things like that where it's very specific and kind of makes it a little bit more funny. But that general 1-paragraph format can work as well. Okay, so those are 3 general formulas you can mess around with. Get out there, start messaging right away. You'll start getting responses. And that'll take us to our next section, which is general text messaging. Once she's responding, how to move the interaction forward.